Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a live NBA mock draft. Obviously, the draft's a couple hours away. I'm super excited. But yeah, let's just speed run through it. Talk a little bit about each prospect, but not too like in depth. But let's go with the first pick. Obviously, the Mavs pretty easy. It's going to be Cooper Flag because obviously he is the best prospect. I think he's the best freshman prospect I've seen, in a while. I know a lot of one and dones, but skipping his senior year of high school and dominating college basketball. I mean, he's 6'9", 6'10". I mean, 19.4 and 7.5, and I believe shot around 36% from three. He has potential for a two-way superstar. We saw it when he was in the Olympics in the summer against one of the best teams ever assembled in basketball, and he was up there competing with them. But yeah, the obvious pick, the Mavs have to select him. And yeah, don't even bring a phone and listen to any type of offers. But yeah, easy pick. If we go to the second pick, and it's going to be the Spurs. Now, this one's still, pretty easy. It's going to be Harper, and I strongly believe they're not going to trade this pick. And I'm a Spurs fan too, so I'm excited to see Harper. Unless the package is going to be, really, really good, a lot of future assets, and some established, veterans. But yeah, he's a 6'6" combo guard, 19.4 and almost 5. Yeah, his biggest weakness is his 3-point shot. I believe he shot around 32 to 33% from three. And obviously, De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle and Jeremy Sohan, they're all kind of iffy on threes. And I think Fox is the best out of those, but I believe it could work. Draft the best player available. Because yeah, he's getting a lot of Cade Cunningham comps, and I could see it because I love his ball handle. His shot selection, it's a little, but it was only him and Ace Bailey running the offense. It's not really a pro style, scheme over there at Rutgers. So yeah, he's gonna have to learn. But being in San Antonio with Wimby, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, you have, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell. You basically have everyone. I think you're only really losing Chris Paul. That was in your rotation. But yeah, this is a pretty good pick. So let's go to the third pick. It's going to be the Sixers, and there's no way they're going to select Ace Bailey because reports saying he canceled workouts the day before, I believe, or the day of. Either way, that's kind of messed up because I'm pretty sure it takes a lot because you need like the owners, maybe the GM, the president of operations, and obviously the head coach, and maybe a bunch of trainers, coming up with skills to do, and then hey, I'm not coming. It's kind of not the best look for you. So I think he didn't want to go there anyway because he wants to be a number one option. But I have them selecting a VJ Icon because this guy has a way of impacting the game more on the defensive end than a lot of these other prospects. Besides Cooper Flag, but I think he could be a two-way star in the making just because his physical build. He's 6'5", 6'6". I believe he weighs more than 180. I think he's pushing closer to 190. But yeah, 15, 3, and 6, almost 6 rebounds as a 6'5", 6'6" guard. He shot around 34% from three too, so that's not too bad. But yeah, he's a better fit on the Sixers just because he doesn't need the ball in his hand to score as much. He could, score off of defensive stops and cutting to the basket, hustle plays. And I like this pick better than an Ace Bailey, who's just kind of a one-dimensional type player. If we move to the fourth pick, the Hornets. Now this one's a little, up in the air. Do you select Trey Johnson, who is probably the best player I think available at this point. But with Lamelo Ball and Brandon Miller, I think it just actually doesn't work. I know select best player available, but I don't believe this could work as much as a Con Knipple, because at Colin Knippel, he shot 40% from three, and almost 14, 15 points a game, being a number two option behind obviously Cooper Flag. But I really like Colin Knippel because he could be a really good piece on a really bad team like the Hornets, and I think he could be a really good piece on a good team like or the Sixers or the Spurs because that's the type of player he is. He's a high IQ player, and he's only 19 years old, so he's only going to get better. And defensively, he's no slouch either. At 6'7", 217, 220, like he could hold up his own ground. So I like this pick. If you're a Hornets, it's nothing to be like, oh, he's going to be a future All Star. And also, I wouldn't be mad if they take Trey Johnson because his upside is higher than Colin Knuppel. But yeah, I like Colin Knuppel fit way better. Let's move on to the fifth pick, and I think at that point you have to select, a Trey Johnson. You can't let him go past 5, in my opinion. I could see Trey Johnson going, third to the Sixers. It's just I think they will move that pick because, they have, you know, Tyrese Maxey, you got Paul George, you got McCain, you got Embiid. You have all these people who have to have the ball in their hand, and I don't think Trey Johnson fits all that. But I could see it. But yeah, if the Jazz get Trey Johnson, I think he could be a future All Star and top 3 player in this draft class. I mean, he scored basically 20 points a game and around 39% from three, and he's a big guard. 6'6", 190. But yeah, I really like his shots. And he could score at 3 levels. He could shoot the three. He could hit the free throws. He could hit the midi. Yeah, just overall, I like his game. I think he's the most gifted offensive player in this class, right behind obviously Cooper Flag, but I think he's right up there pushing it. And yeah, this is a really good pick if you're the Jazz. I know they wanted Cooper, but if you get Trey Johnson, I see potential here. So let's move to the sixth pick, the Wizards. I think this is where you have to select, an Ace Bailey because yes, reports or he's not, 6'10", and he keeps canceling workouts with all these teams, but obviously he wants to be a number one option, and he still won't be a number one option with the Wizards because they just traded for a bunch of veterans, CJ, and I'm like, whoa, you traded Poole, and what are you doing exactly? Because now you have 3 veteran guards, and it's just kind of a weird. You have a lot of Chris Middleton obviously opted in, and I mean, it's good for Ace because he can learn behind Chris Middleton, an NBA champion. 17, he doesn't really pass. Obviously, that's his weakness, and his shot selection's not the best. And I know he said in his draft combine like, "Well, I practice these shots, and they're not a bad shot because I practice them all the time." And I think yes, and to a certain extent, because you're gonna learn what a bad shot is in the NBA because you shoot these shots, and they just start a fast break and then they score, super easy because that shot just ricocheted and it's just a bad shot. And he's gonna have to learn. And with all these veterans the Wizards have, hopefully he does. So if he wants to be a number one option, eventually this is the team for him. I mean, he's only 19 years old, but yeah, this is a good pick if you're a Wizards fan. So let's move on to the seventh pick. The Pelicans should select. Oh, this one's kind of up in the air because obviously you just got pulled. So CJ's not on the team. And I believe yeah, Kelly's not on the team anymore. I don't think you select the small forward because you still have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. I think this is the season you move on from Jordan Hawkins. I don't really see him as a long-term fit. You just drafted Yi Misi. I don't see them drafting a center, even though because he's also super raw. So if you select 2 raw centers, it's going to be kind of difficult to develop. I think obviously Dejounte is going to miss some time, but at this point, you draft, for the future. I don't think DeJounte is going to be there. It's too long. You get Jeremiah Fears. I think he's going to be the second best point guard in this draft class. I don't believe he's 6'4". I think he's more in that 6'2", maybe 6'3" with shoes on. But yeah, his weight, 182, 180. But yeah, he's a great combo guard. I think his handle is amazing. I watched most of his games actually, and man, this guy can dribble the ball. His biggest weakness is obviously his 3-point shot. I believe he shot around 28%. In that range. But yeah, obviously you can't do that in the NBA. But you have veterans, you have Poole, you have Zion, and you can learn from them. And hey, this is how we do it in the NBA, and he's not gonna be asked to, lead the team right away because I don't know what direction the Pelicans are going. I think they're still trying to make, a playoff push or, a play-in push. So I don't see him, playing a lot of minutes, especially because, DeJounte Murray is eventually going to come back and you're going to have to pay him because he's, getting paid, so much money. But yeah, I like this pick. Let's go to the eighth pick, and this is the Brook. And I have the Brooklyn Nets, taking a swinger on because right now you have, I think, around five first round picks because they just made some trades. So you have this pick, the 19th pick, the 26th pick, the 27th pick, and I think you just got the 29th pick, if I'm not mistaken. So this is not updated as much. But yeah, I think this is where you take a swinger because I think you should move on from Nick Claxton. But if you don't, it's kind of, do you want, Kamal? I don't know, two, bigs that, can't really space the floor yet, but his potential is better. Or do you take a Derek Queen, who's more of a, power forward type? And I think this is where you do select, Kamal Watch because, his potential, 7'2", 250. Yes, his stats are not, doesn't do it justice at his height and, whatever. He only shot, 25% from three. But yeah, you're banking on his potential and his defensive, capabilities. Yeah, but I like this pick. I think they should move on from Nick Claxton. Um, and Kamal could be your long term, piece. And they have done, pretty good at, drafting, centers. I mean, like a Jared Allen and, even Nick Claxton. So yeah, I like this pick. They should probably move on from Claxton after, getting this pick. But yeah, let's move on to the next pick, and it is going to be the Raptors with the ninth pick. Now, this one's kind of, sketchy because you traded for Brendan Ingram. We don't know what they look like yet because we didn't see a game. You extended quickly. You have Barrett, for, 3 more years or 2 more years, and I think in a player option. You got Pirtle, you extended for, 3 years. Obviously, you got Barnes, and then you have Grady Dick, who, you selected and who I really like, and he's going to be, a really good piece. But you drafted Jacoby Walters, last year, and he didn't really play as much. But towards the end of the season, we saw glimpses. So this one's kind of, I like, Derek Queen here just because I see him more of a, power forward than a center because he's smaller than, 6'10". I think he's like 6'9.5" with, barefoot. But yeah, I see him more with a, defensive center like a Pirtle. And I think that's where he's going to thrive because I believe in his playmaking a lot. And I think he's just gonna thrive in this type of offense. And he's not gonna be asked to do, everything because he has a lot of like other scorers around him. But can he come in and, get a quick, 8 points and, maybe 4 or 5 rebounds and, impact the game? Yeah. And yeah, overall, I like this pick if you're the, Toronto Raptors. So let's move on to the 10th pick. And then obviously this is from the KD trade. So KD's no longer with them. And I think at this point, they're going to probably select someone who can help them right now versus, a potential long term piece. And I think it's either going to be Colin Murray Boyles or Carter Bryan. But I think at this point, they're going to have to select Carter Bryan just because of his 3-point shot. He shot around 37% from three. And, at 6'8", 220, 225, his 3 and D is all there. It kind of reminds me of a Mikal Bridges type player who they also selected a couple drafts ago and obviously traded for the KD. But I don't think his NBA ready is there yet because the Villanova scheme is just, screams NBA ready players. So overall, I like this pick. If you're the Suns, you take Carter Bryan, uh, and he's going to help you right away because his defense is going to translate, and hopefully his shot translates. I believe it will because he shot up draft boards because of that. But yeah, I like this pick. Hopefully they don't trade it either. Let's go to the 11th pick. And that's gonna be with the Portland Trailblazers, and they just traded, Simons right now, so it's gonna be Drew Holiday, and I guess they're trying to make more of a play-in push too, because they were close last year, but I think they realized like, hey, we're not gonna make it, so let's just call it quits and then try again next year and get someone in the draft that can help us. And I think that screams, hey, we need more of a win now player or someone who could help them now. And I think they're going towards more defense. So I think this is where Colin Murray Boyles could go. I think he could also drop to like the teens if he doesn't get selected here. I'm just trying to think. Uh, you know, the Trailblazers want to make the plan, so they want to make a good defensive team, and obviously offensively he's not there yet. His 3-point shot is just not where it needs to be, and he's an undersized power forward. But he's still 245, 250. He could hold up his own. And this is like the first sophomore, off the board. He's only 20 still. So his potential still, could be, higher than what people think. But if he does go this high, I could see him going to the Suns too. But defensively, he's going to help any team right away, and I think he'll help the Trailblazers. And hey, he can learn from Drew Holiday, a really really good defender. So that's a good pick. Let's go to the 12th pick with the Bulls. Now, I don't think they'll select a guard because they kind of have too many guards. I don't think they'll sign Trey Jones back. Yeah, I hopefully they extend, Josh Giddey. But yeah, I don't think they'll select any guards. I think this is where Asa Newell goes off. Yeah, I think he'll go off because he kind of reminds me of a Kenneth Fareed. I really like his motor. Um, I seen him actually. I watched a couple of his games, and I really, really liked it just because he did shoot some mid range shots, and it didn't look too bad. He's basically 6'10", 6'11". But yeah, he reminds me of Kenneth Fareed because I love his motor. He crashes the boards. He's gonna be a double double machine, and it's just a flashy pick for the Bulls. But no, but you're at the 12th pick. You're trying to find a player that can help you and your team right now. I could also see them making a trade, and if they do trade a guard, you could draft a guard. But if you do not draft a guard and put him in the bench, and he's just there not developing. But yeah, let's go with the 13th pick. And this is with the Hawks, and obviously they made the trade for the Kristaps Porzingis. So I believe they traded Terrence Mann and yeah, Ding. Yeah, yeah. He's gone, and I think a future second round pick. I don't know if it's from this draft or I think it's a future pick. But for Kristoff, I think that's pretty good because he's not on a big contract yet, and you kind of playing it out, see how it is. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I think this is where you kind of we have to blow it up. You know, trade Trey Young for a bunch of draft capital or a young piece. But at this point, I don't think you'll select another guard because you still have Kobe Buffin, who obviously was hurt last year, and you need to figure out what you're going to do with him. I think this is kind of his make or break season. Daniels just had one of the best defensive seasons we've seen. I really like him. You got Jalen Johnson, who's obviously I think going to be your number two, and I think this is where you take Edgar Dimon just because of his size. He's a 6'9", shooting guard or point guard. I don't see him really as a point guard, but shooting guard, small forward type. Uh, his biggest weakness is obviously his 3-point shot, but I don't think he's going to be asked to do too much right away. And hopefully, his defensive, physical abilities kind of makes up for his 3-point shot, and he's not going to be asked to run point guard and lead the team off the bench because you kind of have a lot of depth in that position. So yeah, I like this pick. It's kind of a swing, and yeah, it's a 13th pick. You might as well, take a swing on a project player like Edward Dimon. And if you go to the San Antonio Spurs with the 14th pick, obviously they got Harper, so I don't think you select another point guard. And possibly you could trade this pick, and I could see that. But let's just kind of go through the motions. Now, is it too high to select Thomas Sober? Ugh, I think it is because I have him in the teens. At this point, I think you should take a swing on a fellow, French project player, just because you don't need a guard at KJ, and you can see Cedric Howard is, a pretty, NBA player now. He's more ready. Do you take a now a Nick Clifford maybe? But at that point, Danny Wolf. I think this is where you select Noah Essengay just because he's a project player. This is the 14th pick. He could develop in the G League. The French connection with him and Wimby. Yeah, I like this pick, and I think he's actually still playing basketball in his division or his tournament. So like he's still playing right now. His team's good, and with these foreign players, they know how to play team basketball versus obviously the Americans kind of just play one on ones a lot of the times. But yeah, I like this pick. Let's go to the 15 pick with the OKC Thunder, and obviously they just won the championship, and they're bringing most of these players back, and um, I think you're developing more of a um, what do you do when we have to extend a player? So it's more project players rather than um, NBA players that you need to play now, which is like a Cedric Howard or a Nick Clifford. So I think I have them select more of yeah, a Cedric Howard just because um, I do think they're gonna trade, some pieces at the trade deadline because they're not gonna have, the salary cap to extend them in the off season. And that could be, I don't see an Alex Caruso, but you're gonna have to pay like, Chet, you're gonna have to pay uh SGA eventually, and then Jalen Williams, and then Dort, and I could see Cedric Howard kind of doing this. The only thing is, like I said, um, he's an NBA player right now, so I believe the Thunder might make a trade at the deadline and kind of fill him in because he's a 22-year-old senior. Like he's the oldest player that's been taken so far. So, but I like him overall. His physical abilities. He's a 3D player. Kind of perfect fit for the OKC Thunder. Okay, let's go to the next pick. Oh, we have the Grizzlies, and obviously the Grizzlies or the Bane is gone, and this is the 16th pick. At this point, you should take a risk on, and I think yeah, obviously this is the 16th pick. Take a swing. You you got KCP, you got Cole Anthony, you get rid of Desmond Bain, but you get a bunch of I believe 5 first round picks. So take a swing. Are you comfortable, moving on? I mean, you have Zach Edey. I don't think you select a center here. Yeah, I think this point you select, KJ, Kasparis Yakachonis off the board. You know, he could, run point. He could play shooting guard. Yeah, his 3 point shot is not all there, but yeah, this is the 16th pick. Take a swing, develop him a little bit, learn from Jaw. Yeah, I like this pick overall. He's a 6'6", 200 pound, point guard, shooting guard. He could help Jaw take the load off of him. But yeah, this is a good pick. So let's move on to the 17th pick, and this is going to be the Timberwolves. And I think Mike Conley is not going to be with this team, and if he does, I think he needs to come off the bench, and I think Rob Dillingham has to start. And hopefully they could sign, Nikhil Alexander Walker back. And this is hard because I think Shannon's going to be a bigger role too. Because I like his offensive game and his defensive game. He's a good hustle player. I think Donovan DiVincenzo should have been a little better. You really need a Nas Reed. You have to pay him. You have to pay him. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels got paid. I think sign and trade with Julius Randle will, most likely be more of a thing that they should do. No one really wants Rudy Gobert unless you're attaching multiple first round picks. But at this point, I don't think you select, another small guard. I think this is where Thomas Sober comes off the board. Another big that can, help you. I mean, 6'10", 250, kind of a double double machine. And I think potentially he can, replace Rudy Gobert in a couple years when his contract's over. I don't know. But 17th pick, I think he could help you right now, especially in the playoffs or in late game situations, because I think Rudy Gobert is kind of unplayable in some aspects, and I believe in Thomas Sober. I can see him going a little bit higher too, but yeah, this pick is a decent pick. So let's move on to the 18th pick. We have the Wizards. Okay. So they traded Poole. You bring in CJ, and I just don't know what direction they're going. You got Ace Bailey with the sixth pick. So, I mean, you have a potential star. I don't see them because you have Bob Carrington. I don't see them also selecting another point guard. I think if you're trying to win now, I don't think you, no, Liam, because he kind of reminds me of a Corey Kisper in a sense, because they're both 3-point snipers. Do you select a Danny Wolf? Is that too high for Danny Wolf? I don't know because obviously Alex Sar, but he can help with spacing. I don't think you select another shooting guard, small forward. You know what? This may be too high, but yeah, I think you could select, Danny Wolf. And I only say that because he's going to help with spacing. And I truly believe that Alex Sar is a power forward. I know he's like 7 foot, one, but I think he plays more of a power forward, sort of like how Wimby is. But I think Wimby's stats are way better as the center. But if he gets a more defensive, power forward, he's going to thrive more. Danny Wolf is not that, but I think he could, space the floor. I think he almost averaged, a double double, and he's still 7 foot 250, and you're kind of taking a swing on here with the 18th pick. It's just a weird direction that they're heading, but I like this pick. He's gonna help you, floor spacing wise. You can never have too much, big man that can shoot. So let's go to the 19th pick. And the 19th pick, okay, now we're with the Brooklyn Nets, and you selected Kamal with a eighth pick. Now I don't think you obviously select another big at this point. You should take a swing on Jace Richardson, but like you still have Cam Thomas, and you're gonna have to pay him, and they're both kind of small guards that kind of remind me of each other. But do you? I think this is where Nick Clifford gets off the board because he 6'6", 200. He's the oldest I think prospect in the first round. I think this is fifth year in college, but he could help you right away. He could shoot the three. He could defend. 18-4 and almost 10 rebounds. I know the competition's kind of not all there because the team and the conference, but yeah, I think he could help you right away. And you have 5 first round picks. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, take a swing. um, you're bound to hit on one of them. So yeah, I like this pick overall. Let's go to the next pick. Oh, sorry. The Heat should select a potential player they could potentially build around. Um, what I'm saying is, I think they should not draft a player that can help you make a playoff push, because I don't think you should. I think you should try to rebuild. I mean, trade Bam. I know that sucks to say because you have Wiggins. Rozier's just been bad. Duncan Robinson's not been good. The Kyle Anderson obviously came in the trade, but I don't think he's a long term piece. I like Mitchell. He's a good hustle player, but like, yeah, don't trade Ware. Play him more with um, Bam if you can. Um, I think Hawkes, you know who he is at this point. He kind of, we see this a lot of time with older rookies. They peak too early, and yeah, they're kind of just going downhill. They should capitalize on his value right now. And you like Love, a good veteran to have around, but yeah, I think at this point you should select, at this a potential, player that you could build around undersized, point guard, but still, Jace Richardson. I can see him going higher, but I really like his game. He's probably in that 6'1", 6'2", 180 type of range, but overall, I like his game. He's a great scorer. Um, he's explosive, which I like, and he can shoot three. And with the 20th pick, it seems like a Heat player. Someone who's kind of has all these flaws on him. He's not. He's been told like he's not big enough and he's not strong enough, and then he's going to come and average 12 points a game on good efficiency. So overall, if they select him, I will like this pick. But let's go to the 21st pick. And this is going to be with the Jazz, I believe. Okay. So you got Trey Johnson with your fifth pick. At this point, you should select a more project player too. And I think is it McNeely? Liam McNeely. No, I don't. I think this is where you select Liam McNeely because he's he could space the floor. He shot in the high 30s from three. I know he was out of position playing and he was hurt, and that's where he kind of his draft stock fell. I could see him going higher actually too, but if you get him and Trey Johnson in the same draft class, that's a win because he's gonna translate. He's a big 6'7", 210, 215, small forward, and if Cody Williams doesn't work out, he could just fill in that role right there. But yeah, I like this pick. Let's move on to the 22nd pick. With the Hawks, think you get a project player of Egor Damon, who shooting guard, small forward type. Is this where you still have Kristaps Porzingis, but do you worry about his health long term? This is where I'm like, wow, what do you do if you're, a team like this? Because you're in the East, you could make a plan or playoff, push, but at the same time, like, do you want to, or are you kind of in the back of your mind, hey, let's draft, a potential, um, player that could help us if we do trade, a Trey Young. I think this is where Rusher Fleming gets off the board just because he's still, an undersized power forward, but he's a big body, and I believe defensively he can help your team. And I don't expect him to play a lot of minutes unless some injuries happen, which it happens in the NBA, especially last year. Jalen Johnson, you know all these injuries that happened with Kristaps Porzingis, so he could, fill in that, spot if, injuries happen. And I'm not really expecting much, from him just because, I don't see two like an all-star in his future or like an all defensive team. But I see a really good player with the 22nd pick, and I like his hustle and his motor, big body that can, help Trey Young, and Trey Young's gonna make him, a lot better. We've seen that again with all his teammates. He just makes players around him better. But yeah, let's move on with the 23rd pick, and this is from the Pelicans, and you got a point guard with Jeremiah Fears with the seventh pick. So I don't think they should select another guard, but at the same time, you can't have too many guards because I just don't believe Hawkins is going to be there by the end of this year, and you have Alvarado, who he's on a decent deal, so you can't really move on from him as much, just because he's a good hustle player, and he's one of those like Pat Bev type players. I think at this point you should start looking into maybe packaging this trade for like maybe a future asset or a more established veteran because I don't think they'll select another guard, but at the same time, I think at this point you select someone that can help you in the future and that you don't need to play right away. And I think that's Ben Seraph, just because I think he could be the next, uh, tall point guard for you on the Pelicans because I think he does have the best court vision or one of the best court visions in this draft. He's a high IQ player, and again, I really like these foreign players because they play winning basketball, and it's easy for them to come in and play the right way. And most of them are high IQ players, not all of them obviously, but you're kind of taking a swing with the 23rd pick, and I don't see him playing right away. But you never know. The Pelicans have so many injuries; he could play like right away. But yeah, let's move on to the next pick. It's the 24th pick, and it's going to be with the Thunder. And I think they're probably going to trade one of these picks because I don't see them having two first round picks and keeping them, especially if you look at this roster. I mean, yeah, you have all these young guys that don't even get a play. Yeah, it's kind of the rich get richer because could you select, Walter Clayton Jr.? That would be, pretty cool because dang, I don't think you select another point guard because you got Toppin, right? Yeah, you have Nikolai Topic. Yeah, I think this is where Will Riley gets off the board, just because you can never have too much shooting, and like I said before, the Thunder are gonna have to eventually pay these players, and I don't think they'll go over the second apron. And we've seen it before. They don't want to pay luxury tax, and that's why the James Harden trade happened. So I could see them, letting that Lou Dort go or trading Alex Caruso and maybe eventually Andrew Wiggins, or excuse me, Wiggins. And I'm like, okay, well, you have these, shooting guard small forwards that are similar built, and they could just, they just need experience. So I like this pick. Um, it's okay to take a swing on a player even if you don't land. We've seen it before with the Thunder, but yeah, the 24th pick, that's a pretty decent pick. Okay, let's go to the 25th pick, and we got the Magic. Now the Magic just needs shooting. You traded basically like every one of your future picks uh, for Desmond Bain. So this pick is kind of important. I thought this would be part of the trade. If this is not part of Desmond Bain trade, sorry, I think they need to hit on this, and you need shooting. So you have to keep Walter Clayton Jr. In the state of Florida, and that's a really good pick because we saw him. He could hit big shots. That tournament run by him, was crazy because I really didn't have them winning at all because I thought Duke was, up there. But yeah, you need 3-point shooting, you need playmaking, and I think Walter Clayton could do that. He's still undersized. He's an older prospect, so don't expect him to, be this next All Star, point guard that you gave with the 25th pick. But yeah, overall, this is a good pick because you need shooting, you need the floor space, and I think he does that for you. So let's go with 26 pick. And I think this is with Brooklyn Nets. So you have, Kamal with the eighth pick. And you get Nick Clifford with the 19th pick. I think this is where you start taking swings. And I think this is where Nolan Troyer goes off the board. Sorry if I butcher his name. Um, we seen him in the beginning of the year. He was supposed to be, top 5, top 10, and he's just dropped, all the way, to the first round. I could see a team too, like maybe even the Grizzlies taking a swing on him just because um, he was supposed to be like one of the best point guards in this draft class, and his shooting is just not been good, and I think his injuries are kind of where it's at right now and kind of hurting his game. But that's also something to look if you're organization. He's 6'4", he needs to put on weight. He's 185, 190. But yeah, overall, I would like this. The 26th pick. You had to take swing. You have 4 or 5 first round picks. You're bound to hit one of them. But yeah, let's move on to the next pick. The Brooklyn Nets. So yeah, you might as well take a swing because you have back to back picks. And I'm like, okay, you kind of have a shooting guard, small forward you selected. You have a point guard that you potentially select, and then you have a raw center. So what do you need? So I think they should select, Hugo Gonzalez, out of Spain, and it's that I know it doesn't pop up, but he's super raw, and this is a potential, 3-4 year project player in my opinion. But yeah, he's super young, 18. Yeah, if you look at his highlights, it's not that impressive, but at the same time, you have 4 or 5 first round picks. You have to take a swing, and I think I see, a potential, 3-point sniper, and I really like him. If he goes to the second round, I could see that too. But yeah, I if you're the Brooklyn Nets, I don't expect you to keep all these picks, so you might as well take a swing. I think a trade is probably going to be happening. Maybe that's what they're doing with these picks, but yeah. Let's go to the next pick. The 28th pick is with the Celtics, and obviously, Drew Holiday's not there. You have Anthony Simons, and then Kristaps Porzingis is not there. I expect, Sam Hauser probably to be traded too, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe, I mean, maybe he'll be there. But yeah, there's calls about, Jalen Brown and, Derek White. Hopefully they don't trade those guys. Those guys are key pieces in their rotation. But yeah, I think at this point you need to select a player that can really help you right now. And maybe a long term piece, but I doubt it because I don't know. I really like the Celtics roster like this. I think they should have just kind of traded, one of the players, Kristaps Porzingis, and kept Drew Holiday because I still like Drew Holiday. I know his stats don't do him justice, but yeah, I know cheap owners, I think at this point you take a swing on I think at Drake Powell. I like him. I watched him. I think he could be a great defender. I know his stats are not, that good, but this is the 28th pick. I mean, you're not really saying this guy's going to be the next, our 3-0, and he's going to help us win a championship. I mean, his size is really good. Defensively, he can help your team. Tatum's going to be out for, the whole year, most likely. I don't see him coming back. And yeah, he could, be a little glimpse into, hey, maybe he can be this 3-D player with us. And yeah, so let's go to the 29th pick. And this is owned by the Suns. And I think they need a more center type approach. Someone that could, at least score without, you know, running plays, to him. And I don't think Nick Richards can really do that. He's more of a, a putback dunk, a lob threat. And I think that's when Maxi gets off the board. To be honest, his size is great, 7'1", 250. He's an older prospect, double double. Look at that, 20 points, 10 rebounds. Is he going to average that in the NBA? No. But can he get 8 rebounds and sometimes 12 and 10 and space the floor? And I think he could do that. He's an older rookie. His size is great. I think they need size. They don't really, since trading Aiden, they didn't have a reliable center, and he's not going to rim protect as much and do a bunch of things that you probably need, but you never know. This is the 29th pick. You need uh size, and I don't think in free agency you're going to address that, so you might as well address it in the draft. So I like this pick. I can see him going a little bit higher, maybe in the 25s, you know but if he falls to you at 29, I would take him. But let's go to the last pick in the first round, and this is with the Clippers. And I think this player is probably going to go higher. It's just the fit is kind of, I don't know. I like him. I'm a Spurs fan, so I follow some reports, and it's excuse me, Joanne Burnsay. Is that how you say it? Not too sure, but he's a French prospect. Um, I don't know too much about him. He's super raw, obviously, and but overall, Joanne Bursay is a super raw player, and he's gonna need time to develop. But I feel like he's not gonna be a good fit with the Clippers. But they need more size, and at 6'10", he needs to put on weight. But I can see him going higher into like the teens. Um, I didn't really watch too much film of him. I just saw reports that the Spurs worked him out because I follow a lot of Spurs reports, and I think they could even take a swing on him and at pick 14, if I'm not mistaken, because I mean, at that point, it's the 14th pick, and I don't know how much time a 14th pick is going to play on that roster, anyways. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of my mock draft for at least the first round. I'm super excited for this draft class. Let me know if I drafted the player, too high or too low, and where you would have drafted the player, and what your team is, and who you're excited for. But yeah, this is pretty much uh, who I think that it's gonna go. I could obviously see Trey Johnson going 3, and them even trading the pick. I could see Ace Bailey falling to even the Brooklyn Nets, and I could see a bunch of trades happening. I don't know. I could even see somehow the Suns saying, "Let's trade for another, established veteran and superstar, and package this trade and trade in the 10th pick," which I don't think they should do. But yeah, overall, I do like this trade, or excuse me, this mock draft. Um, yeah, Edgar Demon, that's a kind of a good fit, but yeah, it's a little sketchy with you know Trey Young and his shooting. Yeah, but overall, I think the Thunder kind of won this uh, uh, draft just because if they select these two players, yeah, they're rebuilding, uh, like reloading for next year, and I overall, it's a scary team. But yeah, let me know down below what you think. I could see obviously more players going higher. Maxi, I think he could even go, to Brooklyn again, but Hugo could go to the Thunder, but he's not really gonna. All these Thunder players, I don't see them playing as much. But yeah, let me know down below what you think and where your favorite prospect ended up and where you actually think he's gonna go. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys.